Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes survival begins not with rescue, but with rejection. Imagine being told you're worthless by the one who gave you life. Imagine being punished for standing up, not for doing something wrong, but for daring to exist with dignity. Now picture being thrown into the cold with nothing but a broken arm, a wrinkled dollar, and no one asking if you even made it through the night. This isn't a story about violence. It's a story about what comes after, when the silence is louder than the bruises, and healing doesn't come from home, but from strangers, clay, and a voice finally learning how to speak. If you've ever felt invisible, this story sees you. If you've ever been discarded, this story holds space for your return. Now step into the quiet, into the dust, into the hands that chose to create instead of collapse. They say the quietest families hide the loudest violence. From the outside, the house on Eastwood Avenue looked like any other modest suburban home. A beige box with chipped shutters and a porch light that flickered more from neglect than charm. But to Rowan, it was a stage set for survival, and tonight, the script was bleeding. Dinner was the only time of day she pretended her family was real. 15 minutes of orchestrated civility. Forks aligned like soldiers, paper napkins folded crisp, and a cheap tea light candle glowing bravely between dishes of bland pot roast and strained silence. She moved like a ghost among the living, placing utensils with the reverence of someone hoping the ritual would ward off chaos. But Rick, her stepfather, slumped into his chair like he owned not just the house, but gravity itself. Aiden, his 8-year-old son from a previous marriage, already issued orders like a boy king with juice-stained lips. Juice, he barked without eye contact. Rowan poured it, her hands steady, but her jaw clenched. Her mother, Marlene, never looked up from her phone. Rick grunted, "He likes it with ice." So she turned back to the freezer. When she returned, Aiden's smirk had already bloomed. "Too slow," he hissed. The fork clattered to the floor. "Oops." She bent down, knees digging into the cold linoleum, fingers grazing the stained tile where she'd once cleaned blood she never admitted was hers. She rose, placed the fork beside the boy's plate, and began to sit. "He eats first," Marlene said, her voice slicing through the still air. "Then you clean up. He's the king. You know your place." Rowan froze. Then just for a second she sat anyway. Her stomach churned. Rick's gaze lifted, slow and simmering. "Did I say she could sit?" Carter laughed. Rick's chair scraped back. "Juice?" Aiden demanded again, though his glass was still full. "He has arms," Rowan said quietly. "He can serve himself." The room fell into a vacuum of silence. Then the hiss of leather sliding through belt loops. Rick stood. Rowan backed up. Her mother finally looked up, but not to stop him. She stood, crossed the kitchen, and gripped Rowan's face like a vice. "You feed him," Marlene spat, her nails breaking skin, "or you get out, worthless girl." The belt struck once, twice. Rowan screamed. Aiden laughed. Her arm, something snapped. She stumbled toward the hallway, her sleep shirt clinging to blood and sweat. No shoes, no bag. Her wallet was empty, a single crumpled dollar in her hoodie. "Toothbrush?" she whispered. Marlene slammed the door in her face, and that was how it ended. Not with a bang, but a click of a deadbolt that sounded like a verdict. She wandered through Ashford under flickering streetlights that painted her bruises in sepia. At a gas station, she bought the cheapest bottle of water with her only dollar. In the bathroom mirror, her reflection didn't flinch anymore. Just a swollen eye, torn skin, dried blood, evidence of a war no one ever believed was real. She sat later that night beneath a bus stop billboard that read, "Injured? Call now." The irony nearly made her laugh. Instead, she pressed her broken arm tighter against her ribs. A group of teens passed. One threw a drink. Sticky soda soaked her shirt. Still, she didn't cry. It was nearly dawn when he appeared. An older man in a navy coat, blanket in one hand, paper bag in the other. "You hungry, baby?" he asked. She didn't answer, but he sat beside her anyway, slow and steady like someone whose bones had been told too many times to wait. He offered half a sandwich. She hesitated, then took it. "Name's Elijah Stone," he said. "Most folks just call me Mr. Stone or that old fool with the bad knees. Used to mop the courthouse floors. Got a room down at Grace House. It ain't fancy, but it's mine." Rowan didn't speak. Not at first. But when he handed her a frayed quilt that smelled like soap and pine, something cracked, not just in her shoulder, in her armor. "You don't gotta talk," he said, "but you look like someone with a storm inside. Best storms don't speak, they show." Later, at a shelter, she sat in a cafeteria with weak coffee and stale biscuits. She was already folklore among the women there. The girl who'd pulled a knife, they said. The volatile one. The danger, the flight risk. The girl whose own mother filed a report to erase her existence. Shelley, a tired-looking staff worker, slid a file across a metal desk. "They say you're unstable, that you threatened a child." Rowan stared at the papers. Her mother's signature, Rick's false testimony. Nowhere did it mention the bruises, the cracked bone, the night on concrete. She whispered, "They didn't just kick me out. They buried me." That night, Rowan found a quiet library on 8th Street. The login slip in her hand shook, but her fingers knew what to type. "This is how you destroy a daughter." She wrote until the lights dimmed. Not a blog, not a complaint, just truth. What happens when the people who should protect you become the ones who try to erase you? Have you ever been forced to choose silence over survival? But Rowan wasn't done breaking. She was just beginning to mold. And in the back corner of a small pottery studio on Eastwood Avenue, something ancient and dangerous inside her was about to take shape. The studio didn't look like a place that saved anyone. No sign, no music, just a chipped wooden door tucked between a shuttered tax office and a laundromat that coughed steam like a dying lung. But Elijah had said, she needs to make something that doesn't scream. And Rowan had learned to trust the voice of men who didn't flinch when you cried. Inside, the air smelled like wet earth and old ash. Light filtered through high windows, touching the shelves of clay bowls and half-formed shapes with the reverence of stained glass. Evelyn didn't ask questions. She didn't glance at the fading bruises or the cloth sling Rowan still wore like a silent flag. She just handed her a lump of clay wrapped in damp muslin. "It remembers everything," Evelyn said, "but it forgives easy." Rowan sat at the wheel, hands trembling not from fear but from memory. She pressed her palms into the clay, feeling it yield beneath her fingers. But when she tried to wedge it, pain flared in her right shoulder, sudden and cruel. The lump collapsed into a misshapen mess. She stared at it, teeth clenched. It looked like her, once whole, now slack, broken. Evelyn passed behind her, pausing without looking. "Symmetry is overrated," she said. "Pottery's about story. Even scars have shape." That night, Rowan stayed late. The studio emptied, but she remained, forming a bowl that leaned too far left, edges soft, uneven. When she finished, she carved 2 words into its inner lip. "Still here." Evelyn took it gently. "I'll fire it tonight. Come back tomorrow." Rowan walked home under a sky full of broken stars, clutching the quiet warmth of something that wasn't perfect, but was hers. 3 weeks later, she returned to the studio early, fingers stronger, grip surer. Her wrist still twinged when she pressed too hard, but she was learning how to let the clay guide her, not fight it. The space had become sacred, a church of quiet labor and healing hands. Until the door chimed and the air changed. She heard the voice before she saw the face. "Didn't expect to find you playing house with mud." Braden. He filled the doorway like a shadow that never forgot how to twist itself around your throat. His hair was neater than she remembered, his shoes cleaner. But the way he moved, confident, bored, hadn't changed. He walked through the studio like it was beneath him and tapping the rim of a teacup, brushing dust off a vase like it might infect him. "Mom says you've been running your mouth," he said, pausing beside her workstation. "Telling stories, painting yourself as the tragic little artist." Rowan didn't look up. She didn't need to. His voice was the ghost she'd exorcised in her sleep. "You came all the way here," she said finally, "because you're scared. Because for once, your version isn't the only one they hear." Braden chuckled, but it rang hollow. "You think any of this matters?" He gestured to the shelves of half-fired clay. "You think that bowl of yours is going to rewrite history?" Rowan stood. "No, but you showing up uninvited tells me everything." Behind her, Evelyn stepped forward, arms crossed, gaze steady. "This is a studio," she said flatly. "A place for healing. You brought poison." Braden turned to her, smirking. "You don't know her. She's always been dramatic. Unstable. She's rebuilding. Evelyn replied, and you're interrupting. He looked between them, the predator unsure if the room had turned against him. Call someone, he challenged. Rowan stepped between them. No, let him watch. She sat at the wheel, took a new block of clay, slammed it down. Her hands didn't tremble. She shaped the clay slowly, letting the hum of the wheel drown out the years she'd spent silent. The figure began to form, a spiral bowl, the edge chipped by intention. When she shaped its rim, she didn't speak. Braden shifted, then left without a word. Evelyn touched her shoulder. That, she said, was strength. Rowan nodded, but inside her something had fractured again, not from fear, but from knowing how close she'd come to shrinking. And she hadn't. That night, she returned home to find an envelope in her mailbox. No return address, just her name in handwriting she'd once mimicked on birthday cards. Inside, one page. I was raised hard. I raised you harder. Maybe too hard. I see that now. I don't expect anything. Call if you want. No name. No apology. No mention of blood or belts or cold tile floors. Rowan folded the letter once and placed it by the window, next to the small rock she'd taken from behind their old house. Then she lit a candle and watched the flame reflect off the glass of the bowl Evelyn had fired weeks ago. The words still glimmered, still here. Have you ever stood in front of the person who broke you and realized you no longer needed their approval to breathe? The next morning, Rowan walked into the studio and found her mother standing outside the glass, clutching her purse like it could save her from the truth. And this time, Rowan didn't flinch. She opened the door herself. Rowan didn't open the door to welcome her in. She opened it to make sure no one else ever had the power to barge in again. Marlene stood on the threshold of Stone and Fire Studio like someone who'd never known the weight of a locked door. Her coat was buttoned too tightly, her makeup too precise, her expression somewhere between contrition and calculation. She stepped inside without asking. The winter air followed her for a moment, curling around the shelves like a warning. Colin, she said, slipping into the name like a pair of gloves she hadn't worn in years. You just disappeared. Rowan didn't move. She didn't offer warmth or tea or forgiveness wrapped in politeness. She stayed planted behind the work table, clay still drying under her fingernails. I didn't disappear, she replied evenly. I walked out bleeding. Marlene blinked, as if unprepared for honesty in this space. Well, Braden said, she began, but Rowan's voice cut through. Don't bring his name in here. You knew what he did. You knew, and you turned away. Her mother's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands tightened around her purse strap. Families fight, Rowan. Words get said. You've always been dramatic. Rowan smiled, but it was not kind. You called me worthless when I was 12. That's not a fight. That's a verdict. She motioned around the studio. This place, this dust, these shelves, they saved me. Not prayers, not parents. Clay did. Marlene softened her tone, but the edge was still there. I came to help. No, Rowan said. You came because you heard the clay is worth something now. Evelyn stood quietly behind the counter, arms folded. She didn't interrupt, but her presence was solid as stone. Elijah appeared in the doorway to the kiln room, wiping his hands on a rag, and nodded once at Rowan. She nodded back. Witnesses. Anchors. The kind she had longed for all her life. You raised me like a mirror for your shame, Rowan said, her voice lower now, heavier. But I don't carry your reflection anymore. I found my own face, my own fire. Marlene's eyes flicked toward the pieces lining the shelves. Her gaze lingered on the cracked angel wing, the bowl with the words still here, the rising phoenix forged with copper wire and a belt buckle embedded at its base. Rowan stepped forward. I don't need your apology. I don't need your approval, and I don't owe you closure. Marlene lifted her chin. Then I'll go, she said, the tremor in her voice betraying her performance. That's all the help I needed, Rowan answered. As the door shut behind her, Rowan stood still. Not in triumph, not in rage, just stillness. The kind that came after a long, slow storm. That evening, the gallery on Chester Street filled with people bundled in scarves in anticipation. The crowd stretched around the block. Inside, lights glowed across rows of sculptures. Every piece held memory, breath, pain. At the center, under glass, stood the reforged wing, dark, jagged, resolute. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "Created by a survivor of domestic and maternal abuse, anonymous until now." Rowan stepped to the mic. Her heart thudded inside her like it hadn't yet learned peace. "My name is Rowan Arden," she began. "For years I believed my story wasn't worth hearing, that if I just stayed silent long enough, the wounds would forget to ache. But shame doesn't vanish. It ferments until it poisons everything." She paused, letting the air settle. "I was beaten for not filling a plate fast enough. I was discarded for speaking the truth. I was erased by the ones who were supposed to protect me. But clay doesn't lie. It remembers every tremble in your fingers, every fracture you try to hide. This," she gestured around the room, "is not revenge. It's an obituary for silence." Applause didn't explode. It grew, steady, reverent, real. From the back of the room, a woman touched her heart. A man wiped tears. But near the gallery entrance, she saw them. Marlene and Braden standing stiff among the crowd, scanning the room like they still expected control. Rowan didn't flinch. She turned away. A man from the National Foundation for Contemporary Arts approached. "We've been following your work. We'd like to discuss a touring exhibit. New York, London, Chicago, if you're open to it." Before Rowan could answer, Marlene stepped forward with a practiced smile. "That's our daughter," she said brightly. "We're just so proud of her resilience." Rowan turned to the man. "You should know," she said calmly. "They're not here to support me. They came to claim me, now that I've become visible." The man nodded slowly. "Thank you. That's all I needed to hear." Later that night, long after the lights dimmed and the crowd had thinned, Rowan stood alone in the back room of the studio. She lit a candle and placed it beside a small mound of untouched clay. "This," she whispered, "is for the girl who made it through without a witness." The flame danced quietly, softening the shadows. At home, she climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, a soft breeze curling through the open window. On the shelf between the kitchen and the wall hung 3 pieces, the bowl, the wing, and the phoenix. She added one more, a small figurine of a girl sitting cross-legged, arms folded like wings, eyes closed. She carved a quiet smile into her face. When she opened the mailbox the next day, another envelope waited. No address, just her name. Inside, "I still don't know how to say I'm sorry, but I know I broke something. I see that now. I'm learning to live with it. I hope one day you'll let me try to earn your forgiveness." She read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it on the windowsill beside the first letter. She didn't light it on fire. She didn't write back either. Some letters are not answers. They're echoes of lives we no longer live. Outside, a child laughed down the street. Someone burned toast. The radio in the law office downstairs played Otis Redding. Rowan turned toward the wheel and began something new. What moment in this story touched you the most? If you felt something real, comment 100 below. Let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe others need this story, share it. Thank you for watching Life Stories.